All right, hey, welcome to another edition of JTJU, where we all try to be just a little better at the game of Clash of Clans. Got a new format for you. It is Tuesday. This one's called How the Heck Can This Base Be 3-starred? And in this case, we're going to be taking a look at an attack that came to us from Clash with Ed. It's a Max Town Hall 11 attack, Mass Witch. And so really what we're focusing on with this episode, my theory behind it, is really dive into not so much like there's a 3-star, look at it, wow. Rather, what about the base and or the deployment techniques or the mix or whatever enabled it to happen so that you could potentially recreate it on not the exact same similar base. So that's the goal. Let's take a look at the attack. Okay, so here's the base, and there you can see the mix down below of what it'll end up being as a golem in the CC. So it'll be one go Mass Witch with 3-4 Qs to open up the base with EQ there. 1-2 you can see, and they'll do a third one here. But really, when you look at the base itself, what's enabling it, the biggest thing I think, if you want to look at the list of stuff, would be this Inferno on single, and then also the Wizard Tower clumping and the 3 box of the base. So what do I mean by that? When you look at the Inferno, I mean that's pretty obvious. So it's on single. If you have a mass of units coming in, a high volume of units, they're going to overwhelm that Inferno. It's not going to be able to lock onto what it needs to lock, which are the Royals. So that's good, and you can come at it directly. The other thing to notice is that there's only 4 boxes. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So with the 3 Qs, the 3-4 Qs he's going to do, one here, here, and then he'll end up doing one here. Basically, there are no more boxes in the base. So he's basically gone from 4 boxes to 0 in terms of walls holding up the witches. So I don't know if you need to get down to 0 boxes for witch to be successful, but 1 or 2 boxes after your jump and or EQ action is usually a good indicator of having some success. The other thing that's of note, again going back to the list, was the Wiz Tower clumping. If you look at the base, and let me open up, get my pen a little bit bigger here. But if you look at the base, notice how the Wiz Towers are actually in a kind of symmetrical on the horizon, but not symmetrical horizontally, not up and down. So what that does is, if you can press through here and overwhelm this initial AoE, area of effect defense, the attacker then will have this lull in the middle of where mass attack, a witch attack, really is not going to be under the pressure it's worried about, which is from these guys back here. And so as long as you've got things that are moving to the sides on the flanks and pushing to the mid at the same time, such that these mortars, more often than not, are targeting up, the only real problem ends up as being this guy, making sure you take care of him early as the witches try to move through for the mid. So it's probably an ideal situation. What you don't want to see with the Wiz Towers is where they're isolated, meaning they're walled in and protected from, well actually you wall in your mortars, but you don't want them to have a nice symmetrical coverage of the middle, which is where the team starts to wear down and slow down as they're working things. So you got that going for you. Now, beyond that though, in terms of the base, I mean we could talk about the CC Dragon. That's what you're going to see is going to come out. I don't know if there's really a great CC counter to 20 witches, but Valk maybe, but also the deploy sequence, probably that should be an attack highlight, so we'll go over that in a minute. And then incidentally, the stuff that's kind of you can notice, but I don't know if it's really made a big difference. There's no real risk of flanking movement from his attack force. It's going to end up coming from here, 3 main thrusts. But I don't think this is going. These 2 things are at risk because he's going to penetrate through, and all of his stuff's going to go to the mid. So there's no real flank risk, and as well, the mortars being easily accessible is also something you can look at. So the fact that the mortars here and here, I mean you're going to overwhelm this guy, but you have an easy direct run path. They're not isolated, walled in. Like if there was a wall on this, would be a little more concerning, because then your Larrys couldn't. The way the mortars are weak is if you get units up on them. So if the walls keep things at range, the mortars can do a good job of holding things off. So the fact that they're sitting out in the racetrack itself gives you some hope that you can push through and take those mortars out with your mass before they get basically your Larrys up on the mortars before something bad happens. So that's from the base perspective. If we switched over to the attack highlight, which I was probably more interested in, let me get rid of that. Let's just kind of walk through it in slow. Let me switch to more reduced speed, so we can kind of pause as we go. So here's the 4 queues going down. 1, 2, 3. So he's got a totally opened up base at this point. And first thing that drops is the golem. So from a deployment perspective, and then you're going to see the witches coming down in the 3 positions here, here, and here. So from a deployment, the golem comes out first, and that was one of the questions I had if we toggle back over, is as you look at the attack itself, did the golem really help? And as you watch, notice that it does, but not really for what I initially thought it did help around. And that would be, I thought that it would be more about getting fire, locking up this mortar, and then later in the attack locking up these whiz towers so that the Larrys could push in unharassed. But in actuality, what ended up happening is the golem plays more of a role in this attack about tying up this guy, tying up the eagles so that it's not targeting the royals during the attack, to the point that by the time the king gets to about here and is moving through, and the golem's down to golemites, he's within range and can take it out. So that was the big bonus that I think the golem gave to the overall attack, was different than what I would thought. It was really more about just isolating and nullifying the eagle for early stage of the attack itself. So yes, the golem is helping here. And as we keep going, the other thing I kind of did a check on was, notice we're down to 6. Here we'll finish out the deployment. Down to 3, down to 0. The witches were deployed pretty evenly. I mean, he started the flanks on an offsetting manner. But then, really the entire deployment of witches occurred probably within 4 seconds to 5 seconds. So, and it was in groups of 3 typically, of rapid, not in terms of tap and hold, but was single tapping out, alternating back and forth off the flanks into the mid teams. And I think, as people know with witches, if you spin them up in a serial type effect, they end up having their skellies spin up in different timings, which is what you want. You don't want all the skellies being spun at the same time. So spinning them up over 4 seconds for 20 is pretty good, and then groups of 3 was the other thing of note there. And then lastly, notice how the king and queen don't come out right away, nor does the warden. And here's another interesting thing. The queen actually is held to the very end. Warden comes out with the king, and then the queen comes out. So here we are. Now we're in the middle of the attack. As I noted, the golem itself is taking fire from the eagle so that it's not focused on the king and queen. And we're rolling into the base. But notice it's not tying up. The Larrys are the ones handling or distracting the 2 whiz towers and the mortar. They're the ones that actually make that happen. Now the next thing of note here is when and I'll post all these notes on the YouTube channel itself. But the other thing was the grand warding timing and the avoidance of the single by the royals. So notice at this point the golem is targeted by the single. But it's done a pretty good job up to this point. But the warden timing is interesting in that you're waiting, and the key seems to be the giant bomb trigger. Watch this right here is where it's going to fire up. Oh, not yet. So there it is. So what the warden's ability is going to do is to protect this, and maybe like this witch here might get too close from the splash damage from the bomb. In addition, notice we're into this position here. We're going to just start. I don't know if this is on purpose or not, but as the warden ability fires, this multi also begins to fire on the Larrys that are firing around in there. So they too will be taking shots. Another thing's happening at the same time that you might want to be thinking about, and this is when the king's ability happened. And if you didn't catch it, it happened right before this warden's going to get dropped. The king ability just dropped. You can see the barbarians just popped out. So not only is the warden going to protect the barbarians and that the king spawned under Iron Fist, so that he gets that 4 to 5 second immortal aspect to his barbarians under rage, which is huge, considering they would have been AoE'd down by this whiz tower, right? So there's this whole concept of, can I get the warden not only to protect the bomb, but also the timing of the king. I don't know if that's required. I would say not, but it's a nice perk. But the fact that this then allowed the king to push through. But the other thing with the king's ability right here is, notice what's getting ready to happen with this arc of witches. There's nothing left right here for them to have their Larrys work on in their ranged attack. The ranged attack of a witch, I think, is 4. I don't know. I'm guessing, but it's less than a queen attack. But it's got some reasonable range to it. It's weak, but the reason why you care about its range is that the witches themselves are going to push up right here to be attacking this guy, the expo, this guy, this guy, this guy. And the reason why that matters is it brings into range this and this, as well as this, right? So if you left it to its own devices, all the skellies that push through here that see this and you didn't rage the king to blow through this and accelerate through this lane, all the skellies that would come up to support the king would get smoked by this whiz tower, kind of killing out their push into this channel. And at the same time, this thing would be lobbing in things onto the king as well, also killing. So basically, you would have no Larry support. They'd be getting smoked constantly by AoE push on this side. But when you rage it, so let's keep going and check this out. If you rage it right there, grant bonus with the immortal to cover the bomb. Notice where the king goes. King takes out under rage 3 buildings and is basically cleared all the way to here, which then forces the Larrys to turn into mid. So there's this interesting timing of the king ability, not so much for health. If you went back and looked again, the king's ability was not triggered for like, oh, I'm down on low in health, let's go ahead and trigger it now. It was totally intentional. That king ability firing at that point in time basically did 2 things. It cleared and ahead the lane so that the Larrys and witches that were here turned instead of continuing down, because if they continued down and worked this side, odds are this bad boy would not be a happy day for them. They want to kind of stay back. You want this mortar to continue to fire into the mid. So I just thought that was very interesting in terms of the king ability timing. The other thing of note as we're sitting there, attack flow. Ooh, yeah, that was interesting. Yep. Okay, yeah. So then the other thing of note was, can I find my? Where's it at? Right there. Sorry. But the other thing of note was, let's watch the flow of the mid. So the dragon comes out, nothing really happens. But notice how, and maybe that's more interesting down here, but when you have, let's keep going. I take it back. I'm going to speed it up a little bit because most of the decisions now are done. The only thing left is the queen ability. So I'm going to take it back to normal speed and just pause it. So the mass witches, at this point you had about 12 witches ended up focusing the core, largely due to that king ability, sprinting out, clearing this lane so that a component of it turned in, right? So you're going to end up taking out the mid with all that mass of witches. 11 times, what is it, 6? I don't know how many there are, but it's a few of Larrys that are in front of them that are pushing them in against one multi, and it's down pretty quick, right? So at this point, you've got 2 lanes being pushed. This one here kind of stalled out with the king and such turning in, fighting the king there, the multi being there, kind of stalled out this whole lane, as well as this push over to this side. Oops. Yeah. But hang on. Now watch right here. Now this is the part that also interests me. Notice how, and I don't know if this is intentional, but when the wizard tower, in terms of the pathing that the troop is going to take, right? So the pathing the troops are going to attack from, they're not coming from this way, but they're coming from 3 o'clock. The pathing of the Larrys and witches are first going to engage a shorter range whiz tower under the fire of a longer range mortar, right? What is interesting is that's actually the weakest configuration for that flow of witches. If you had the whiz tower here and maybe the mortar here, right? So mortar, whiz tower. When the Larrys pushed up, And granted, they don't have the other problem with this defense is that as the queen comes in, she's the one that's going to smoke all this out. But if you had something going on where she couldn't get to it and they were pushing into this type of setup in a channel, the Wiz Tower coupled with the mortar like this, basically the Wiz Tower keeps the Larrys off the mortar, which is its weakness, the things close range, while the mortar takes out the stuff at long range. If you flip it back the other way, which is the way it's set up, the stuff close range is going to be the constantly flowing skeletons at it, while ranged items like the witches fire at it from this point, right? And so there's just going to be this doubling up, basically inefficient use of the defensive overflow. So I found it interesting that the base layout of the wizard towers being in front of the mortars kind of reduced the effectiveness of that AoE because they're both dumping in the same position. The wizard towers always dump short range, but by having the mortars behind it, the mortars will also dump short range. So you really want the mortars in front so they're taking out this, which is what's going to kill you, right? You want to smoke a wave of skellies and then have, from some luck or chance, your mortar targets the back forces and goes up. So I thought that was interesting, more of a base enabler than anything. So let's keep going. And away it goes. I'll clear off my marks here for you. Because then at that point we're pretty much done, right? Even though there was enough skellies in different timings to overwhelm that one wizard tower, and the queen cleared out the other two aspects of the AoE, and it was over. So I thought it was a very interesting attack. Again, I'll post the notes that I took of attack enablers, and I think I had some miscellaneous stuff. The 8 witches were left. Queen ability wasn't even used really, and they didn't really try to tie up the breach being up there at 12 o'clock. The AoE defense is there. It was more about using the golem to tie up the eagle and using the king ability to clear a lane so that the Larrys would turn and not fight with them. You don't want to have them being splash damaged. You want the king to just take splash damage on his own. Those were some of the big things I saw. Hope it helps. Talk to you guys soon.
Don't touch that, Larry.
Touch it, Larry. You know you want to.
Larry, don't touch
Larry,
that.
do it. Do it, Larry.
Larry!
Yes! Welcome to the first day of the rest of your life, Larry.
What'd I
Good
just
job,
say, Larry?
Good job.